is built at an angle. Normally, the causeway would be 90 degrees from the flat surface of the pyramid. So it appears that the Great Pyramid was built after the Sphinx, and the reason for the angle was to miss the Sphinx because they couldn't go through it. Also, the tunnel system seems to be, it's north, south, east, and west, and it goes several stories underground. I've been 4 stories underground so far, but I've been told it goes at least 10, if not 20 stories down. And it's also believed that sites like Saqqara, which again is a massive location, and that there's a tunnel system there that goes at least as far as the Giza Plateau that we think of, because Abdel Hakim Awiyan, who was an elder who died some years ago, he was filmed in a series called The Pyramid Code, and he stated that when he was young, he was able to go from Saqqara underground to Giza by crawling, swimming, and walking upright. And the unfortunate thing is that the exact location where the shaft is that he went down has been covered in concrete. So, again, this is a way for academics to try to hide the evidence of what's actually there.
So, Brian, it's so hard when you hear statements like that to not use that capital C word, of conspiracy. It's very difficult, and it's, it's for those who go down that road, you get labeled automatically when you start talking about this. But how can one hear what you just said countless times, right? These passages get closed up, they get cemented. You were visiting tunnel systems underneath Giza, showing these incredible video of these places. Places like the Tomb of the Birds were discovered, and then they were exploring it, and then bars got put up right in the middle of the exploration. All these different moments keep happening where it seems like this information is being deliberately, I guess, covered up. Do you think that's just
the real jewel? I think is 23, probably 22. I'll be honest. I think the true jewel right now is 22. But
what's your opinion about why they do this?
What's going on, bro?
Well, I think they're still trying to defend a paradigm. The paradigm is everything was built by the dynastic people, but the megalithic stuff clearly shows that that was not possible. So gradually what's happening now, thanks to videos I make and what other people are making, it shows the obvious evidence that there were construction periods.
Let's go get it. Yes, I agree, dude. I fucking agree, my man. What's up, homie? What's up, Russ? Sorry, my PC overheated, dudes.
The more we're able to film and expose this stuff, more the general public is starting to catch on, and it will make Egypt a much more fascinating place to visit once this, this pandemic thing gets finished with. I think people will go to Egypt not simply for the.
That's going to be the second cam is really going to be the difference maker, I think, for me.
There's all this stuff. Even some of the Egyptologists admit that only 15% of ancient Egypt is open to the public. 85% is still locked and it's all underground. That's why when you go to the Giza Plateau,
all good. Hope it's okay now. I think so.
Lots of different.
I think so. I got a big ass fan on it.
With metal doors.
It might cut out again, but
gradually the authorities in Egypt are slowly starting to open some of these things up, like the Osiris shaft, as I mentioned earlier. That was never open to the public until I think it was 2 years ago. And other places like the Serapeum and Saqqara, most people who visit Egypt don't even go there because the guides don't want to pay the extra fee, or the tour company doesn't want to pay the extra fee to go into it. But it's one of the most mind-boggling places there is on the planet.
I gotta say, I really feel like between Egypt and Peru and Bolivia, those two locations have so many megalithic secrets and underground places that you could almost spend a lifetime exploring them. And I'm encouraged by the work that you are doing and many others to change this paradigm, as you said. This paradigm of history that's tightly controlled as far back as perhaps the Roman Empire. But the point I'm trying to make is that paradigm changing now? Do you see any hints of that changing?
Yeah, I do. And actually the guide we had in March, I can't actually mention his name because he's working on his PhD right now, and he knows about the ancient, he knows the difference between dynastic and he can't say anything about it on camera. So I had to be very careful just to film him at the dynastic sites and let him talk about Horus and Osiris and stuff like that. But he would pull me off to the side every once in a while and tell me about this stuff that is hidden there that he has seen himself, including a huge megalithic complex underneath the step pyramid at Saqqara. He said it's like an underground city that he was able to see once when he was much younger. And he believes that the new people in charge of the antiquities in Egypt will gradually open more and more of these places up, simply because they want, A, they want the revenue, B, they want the tourists to come back, and C, some of the younger Egyptologists know that there is the pre-dynastic stuff, and gradually they're starting to talk about that. So that's changing the paradigm away from the controlling aspects of people like Zahi Hawass, who of course knew all of this stuff, but he would emphatically state that all of it had to have been done by the dynastic people. A few days ago, supposedly Elon Musk sent out a tweet saying that the Great Pyramid was built by aliens, and automatically Zahi Hawass had to make a video saying, how dare you, say such a thing, because obviously the dynastic people did, but he's lying to his people.
I couldn't agree more. To say he's not a hero of mine is probably an understatement. But since you brought it up, I got to ask, because people are going to say, Matt, come on, you got to ask. You've been on the show Ancient Aliens quite a few times. I am the type of person who has a different type of perspective. I don't use the word alien. I study things like, who were these ancient gods, whether or not they were just symbolic or what. But I just wanted to get your take. These structures were built by, we can obviously agree these structures were built by a sophisticated civilizations, if not a civilization, who had incredible knowledge about even potentially things like the diameter of our planet and even potentially the distance away from our sun. Do you think, I guess you can answer this however you're comfortable with, but what is your perspective on where this knowledge came from?
Well, the more I see it, the more I look at these places. Like, I've been to Egypt 8 times. I've been to Machu Picchu, I think 83 times. I've been to Ollantaytambo, which is behind you, more than 100 times. And the more that I visit these places, the more obvious it becomes that you have these two different construction styles. And as we know, some of this stuff would be very hard for us to do with modern 21st century machines. In some cases, we couldn't replicate this stuff. So I'm open to the idea that it was an ancient, advanced, technological civilization that came and visited and constructed and then left. Maybe they left because of the cataclysmic activity. And also, so everything seems to have been pragmatic. Like, what's behind you is part of what's called the Temple of the Sun at Ollantaytambo, and that's something that the Inca named it because they found it damaged in place, and then they built all around it. I'm starting to think more and more that it was off-world visitors rather than being an advanced ancient civilization, because we have no actual evidence of anything like so-called Atlantis. People keep saying, of course, Atlantis is in the Atlantic, or it's in Quebec, or it's in, here, there, or it's Antarctica, or whatever, but we don't have any actual evidence of their existence. So I think, the more I visit, the more I'm very much open to the idea that it was visitors who came and built for some pragmatic reason these, what we think of as energetic structures, or structures that are very sensitive to vibration and energy. And they had the capability, in the case of, for example, Ollantaytambo, to be able to manipulate matter, like to make it soft, very temporarily, as if it was marshmallow material. And so then those stones would basically perfectly fit each other because it was temporarily made soft. And the mountain from which the stone of Ollantaytambo comes from is across the valley and on top of the mountain. So how could the Inca, how could they have cut and transported blocks that weigh up to 70 tons? There's just no way.
That's absolutely amazing. And to me, it's so obvious that we're talking about a culture or cultures that were so sophisticated that they had understandings that we don't even have today. And I find that to be incredibly amazing, considering that we're told in our official history books that we're given that these were all built by the Inca, less than 5,000 years ago, and that's the whole story, and there's nothing else to it. But like you said, when we're talking about precision, we're talking about structures
Insane boosts.
that were so precise.
Like insane
that,
boosts.
like I said before, we perhaps
Damn
couldn't
it.
even build them today with some of the finest masons that are around. I know that I believe you had met and talked to some when you were
So many
explaining or
boosts this
trying to
run? Holy
understand
jeez, man.
places like Tiwanaku
Crazy.
or Kumapunku. And some of them, I think you did this quite a few years ago, but some of them came back and were like, I don't even think I could do this with some of the tools and machinery I have today, right?
Yeah, well, that's very true. We've had quite a few stonemasons and geologists and engineers and people like that, professionals in specific fields come and explore these sites with us in person. And they all say the same thing. They say, there's no way that culture could have done it. So there had to have been someone with much more sophisticated technology, much farther back in time that did it. And the other thing is most of these places, every stone is unique in terms of its shape and size, and we don't approach construction that way. We like to have one uniform thing, like a brick or something, and whoever was building this stuff, just like, well, I need a piece shaped like this, and it goes there, and then I need a piece like this, and it goes there. It's not what we would think of as a logical way to build, but the evidence is, there.
Yeah, and it's difficult for me to wrap my head around, exactly what the purpose of these structures were. And I want to expand on a concept and build up to where we can try to maybe together discuss, why they would have built them like this. For example, one of the things that's, I think, one of the greatest examples to bring up to connect all this, that we sort of scratch your head wondering, how the heck something like that could have been done, is when one of my favorite videos is when you explored the Karnak temple complex, and you were pointing out how there are places within Egypt, especially in Karnak and a few others, where there are these stone blocks that seem to come from a very, very far distance away. For instance, one of them, you identified, using a fellow geologist you were working with, this massive travertine block that is a type of material that doesn't come from even potentially Africa. Is that correct?
Yeah, she believes that the nearest location would be Turkey. So, that's moving stuff, a big distance.
Tragic.
And then, of course, all of the stuff, the granite, most of the granite seems to have come from Aswan.
Wow, no
Transported
camera
hundreds of
either.
miles to the north. Some
Such a
people
scam.
say, well, the standard idea is that the Egyptians built giant barges to transport these stones and the obelisks and stuff. But there are no trees that grow in Egypt of any size that you can use to build a boat out of. So the material for the boats and barges would have to be brought in, and that's a distance of at least 1,000 miles. So yeah, that's the puzzling thing. There's one of the largest statues that ever existed in the world is located at an area called the Ramesseum, which is in Thebes, and it was one piece of stone weighing 1,000 tons. And it was a seated figure of a human being. And now, it got blown into many fragments. Some say that the damage happened during the historical time period, but I don't believe that. I think it's much, much older.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, actually. That's a great area for us to expand on. I wanted to say that along the lines of in Thebes, let's stay in Thebes here. The Colossi of Memnon and the Theban necropolis these two statues are mind-boggling to me, because they're 60 feet tall each, which some people might understand how tall 60 feet is. It's enormous, and they're estimated to be 720 tons each. And of course, that comes from your videos. But one of the things I want to ask you is, and it may be something that you've mentioned before, but I've gone into Google Earth and gone right down into those statues and sort of moved the camera around and looked at where the damage was done, this vitrification on the statues, and I'm finding a measurement or pointing northeast on each one of these statues.
That back boost
and many
is so
other structures
terrible.
around the world. Do you
Fine.
find a common direction where you're seeing damage?
Okay, whatever.
What does that say to you?
Yeah, the damage there and at other locations in Egypt, like at Karnak, it appears to have come, something came from the east. And, Robert Schoch's idea is that it's plasma ejection from the sun. The geologist we use, most often Susan, believes that the stone was scorched with at least 2,000 degrees Celsius heat, like a flash burning. And so the front of the two colossi are more damaged than the sides, and the back are almost intact. And then their orientation is actually 23 degrees off north, south, east, and west. And almost any civilization or culture knows how to figure out where north, south, east, and west are. So that again insinuates that the axis of the planet shifted during the series of cataclysmic activities. And then, interestingly enough, behind the colossi and off to the right is where the 1,000-ton statue is located, or the fragments of it. And it's scorched on his backside, so it looks like he was facing into the Valley of the Kings. And so this force came and burnt the back. And you can tell because the way the granite is falling apart is not the way that granite normally does. It's peeling off in layers, and that indicates that the surface was flash heated, and that parts of it it's still peeling off to this day, and that would have blown the whole thing into fragments.
Man, that back boost, man, just messes up the timing so much.
The Nile Delta called Tanis, which is one of the most bizarre locations on Earth. It's a hill, but it looks like the whole thing was scorched with heat because it can't sustain plant life. And this is the Nile Delta where most of the food of Egypt is grown. So you have this weird hill that comes out of nowhere, because most of the area is completely flat. And that's the site of Tanis, which we've been to twice so far.
So let's try to understand this. We have this north or east direction, or coming from, it seems like this damage has directed itself from, where we're seeing intense vitrification of these very, very hard granite blocks, causing them to literally melt or break apart into pieces from extreme heat. So we know that that is the factor that causes it, okay? So let's build off of that. If there's a certain direction and a certain type of heat that had to create that, do you think do you subscribe to someone like Graham Hancock's perspective of some kind of a cosmic impact? Or do you think, which is what I actually believe as well, that it was more of like a great solar outburst, some kind of an event where it had an impact on not only extreme heat, but also a movement of the poles? Or could a movement of the poles also happen from a cosmic strike? What's your feelings and take on that?
Well, I guess that's what I cover in my book Aftershock, where I look at all these ancient locations, and there are different theories. They all talk about the same time period. They all talk about approximately 13,000 years ago. You have one theory, which is Robert Schoch's, about the solar plasma from the sun. Then you have Paul Laviolette, who's an American physicist, who talks about ejection from the galactic center. That the black hole.
What is this, like 22 pace? It's nothing completed, but I'm just saying. This is for statistics purposes.
Or emit,
like no boost in the big room.
Of energy that goes across
22?
the galactic plane,
yeah.
Which could have gone through the sun, which could have caused the solar plasma effect, and that this happens every 13,000 years approximately, so twice every precessional cycle. And so those are kind of the prevailing theories. Other people talk about
thanks,
a
homie.
comet or an asteroid. A massive asteroid was recently found.
Yeah, that was a pretty legit 22 pace.
Like nickel, iron, and
it was. I did a one-shot. Thanks, buddy.
Asteroid.
You know what it is? It's the one-shot second cam. I gotta just do it. I just gotta do that.
But Brian, isn't that
honestly
older than the supposed age of this event? So therefore, it would
like that.
preclude
See?
having a cosmic impact.
Let's just see the pace.
Like Greenland?
right?
Not that I know of. I mean, the dates
Wait,
that
this
they
is 22.
stated, I think that this
Ah,
impact could have happened.
I mean, like I gotta get that door
between
too. That door's not
13,000
a
and like 100,000 years
door's
ago or
not
something. But it is within,
free.
it is
Let me
within
tell you.
the boundary of that. But
I'm sure, as you know,
I think it was a combination of all sorts of different things. I think
I aim there.
our
I should just
planet
YOLO
was,
it.
was battered by all sorts of different activity for 1,000 years, and that would have decimated.
This might be
any
22 pace
population
again.
centers. Like, you're
Right?
talking about
Really
heat,
good
which
door.
would vaporize plant life and human.
If I don't get
humans
boosted
and
down the
animals,
stairs,
then
like
make these
22.
areas uninhabitable for
Yeah.
hundreds, if not
Oh,
thousands of years.
22.
So I think that's another reason why
What?
that the dynastic people repopulated what we call Egypt now, like 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. But they were, prohibited from doing. Anyone was prohibited before that for a long time because of this literally scorched earth thing that happened, and that's where Tanis again comes into play because the excavations there. I
In the
think they
20s,
started taking
anything
place
long way
about
away in the-
100 years
yeah.
ago, and
Oh, yeah,
everything is
dude.
megalithic. I mean, it's like
Well,
there are
I got
13 different
30,
obelisks that you find there,
like, last
all
September.
snapped into pieces. So that site was
So I mean, I've been
looked
kind of
like-
like working on it for a
looks like
while.
it was
I did
new.
take some time off, but
And then the dynastic people.
I got 30,
discovered
28,
it,
27,
took
26,
some of those
25,
giant
24.
blocks and, built some kind of crude walls out of it. You see stone quartzite there, which is very high.
But I
in
mean,
silica,
completions are rare,
and it's
right?
melted.
I'm sure you could
So,
pace sub
Depending on
30.
the type of stone,
You just gotta.
the heat effect is different. With granite, it makes it explode, basically. The same thing with travertine. Travertine tends to explode if you heat it
Like,
very
it's just
quickly,
so
and
friggin'.
quartzite melts. So there's a couple of figures there, human-looking
I think this is
figures where you
23
look at the
pace.
toes, and the toes are literally
Missed photo.
melted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
23.
it's incredible. I try to, studying this like you do, I try to
What?
envision what this event or events must have been like, and I almost have to shake my head at the idea that we probably can't even comprehend the scale and the magnitude, like Randall Carlson says, the different magnitudes of these disasters on the
Oh
Earth.
my God.
What kind of scale to measure? Do you think that this was a global event, or did it hit key points on the planet?
I think it was global in nature, and it just so happens that the megalithic
See how much
sites
faster
that
the
we
forward
find,
boost is? It's crazy.
Mainly in
Compared to
Peru,
that
Bolivia,
back boost from
Egypt,
the
Jordan,
guard at the bottom of the stairs.
Lebanon, Jerusalem is a recent find. There's a tunnel system under the western wall of Temple Mount. It's got like a 600-ton block in it. So
Shit. It's too
that
slow.
those
It's
general
way too
areas
slow.
Where you had sophisticated cultures existing.
It's too slow.
Way in the distant past.
It's not it. It's
Each
not
one of
it.
those sites has been hit by some kind of cataclysmic damage.
It's too slow.
So, yeah, I think it was global in nature, and as far as I can tell, I've visited most of the ancient megalithic sites, except someday I would like to go to India because there's so much there, but right now, of course, is not the time to go anywhere, so.
Yeah, some of the sites in India, like Barbarical Caves,
Yeah.
Elephanta Island, and Kanhari Caves,
Oh,
just
scam.
incredible
Absolutely
basalt
scam.
carvings out of the rock, these ancient temples that really just shows you that this knowledge and these advanced cultures were covering a much wider area than we might.
I'm pretty sure I didn't
not
open the door,
just,
but I'll try anyway.
Thinking about Egypt and Peru, but we have to add in places like Petra, Jordan, and Nashe Rostam and Persepolis in Iran, and then looking even places like, I don't know if you're familiar with Kinnis Rock in Iraq, just these places where, these sheer cliffs are just carved out with such precision that it really begs the question, what kind of tools were these? And I want to expand on that and get your take, but one of the things that you brought up in your videos that
was
is
really
absolutely
slow.
mind-boggling to me is when you go to the Aswan Quarry in Egypt and you show the areas where a lot of these stones were taken for much of Egypt, and you point out how there are these very odd scoop marks in the granite itself, where it seems like these blocks were scooped out and then reshaped. What kind of tool could have scooped out granite like that? What's your take on that?
Well, honestly, some people think it was some kind of machine with a conveyor belt or something like that, or like a front-end loader, was digging away. I think it was a tool that was vibrational in nature, and it was tuned to the frequency to disrupt quartz, because there's a pretty high concentration of quartz crystal in that granite, and so I think it was almost like a pulse or vibrational tool that didn't actually come in contact with the stone itself, but it just looks like it had a width of about 2 feet and like an arc shape, because it's deeper, the scoops are deeper in the center, and it simply would pass like up and down and then cause the hard material to turn into dust or powder.
It's so odd, and then at the same time we find these what look like very obvious drill holes in places like South America and Egypt, where it looks like some kind of a diamond bit drill was used. But that would have been, according to our, school books of having civilization almost 6,000 years old and using Bronze Age tools, those structures would have been impossible to cut and manipulate like that, correct?
No, absolutely. I mean, diamond encrusted tools were first invented for the mining industry in the U.S. in the 1860s, I think. So there was no technology that could do that before that time. And, people come up with this idea that, if you had like a bronze saw and you had a bunch of powdered diamond or something, and you worked on it long enough that you'd wind up being able to make these cuts. But that's absolutely foolish to think of. So we're talking about, technology we have today that existed several thousand years ago. And there's one site in Egypt called Abu Sir, which is not very often visited. It's got more drill holes than anywhere else of different diameters. You can see the spiral, clockwise spiral way that the tool was going through the material. And some estimates are that the cutting ability of those tools was 500 times more efficient than a modern diamond drill. So you're talking about a cutting material that doesn't exist on our planet that we know of. It's not the speed of penetration, it's the efficiency of penetration, which is so different.
I mean, how do we wrap our heads around the fact that these sophisticated cultures had not only knowledge of aspects of energy consciousness in our planet and all these things that we are either just discovering now or haven't even discovered yet, but they had these tools that are in some ways, like you said, more efficient than we have today as what we consider this modern technologically advanced civilization, but yet they had things that were even more advanced than we are now. So the question is, when you look at these locations and they're traveling over 1,000 miles to find a travertine blocks to bring down to put in these temples, and then they're traveling over 400 miles to the south to Aswan to get these granite blocks in many cases. What do you think the purpose of needing to go to these great distances to acquire them? Was it because of their silica content?
I think all of the stone that seems to have been used, like basalt and granite, tend to have a high quartz crystal content. And so obviously there was some reason, I think some kind of vibrational property or energetic property of the quartz that meant that they would go as far as required in order to be able to obtain the material that they wanted for specific purposes. Like again, with the colossi at Memnon, those are made of quartzite. The one on the left is relatively intact. The one on the right was supposedly rebuilt by the Romans, like very poorly, in the early centuries after the death of Christ, I guess you could say. And the quarry for those blocks are in Cairo, so that's like 400 miles. But they had to be moved probably the original blocks were 1,000 tons each. So how would you transport that? You can't build a boat to do that. So again, it's becoming, the good thing is the more that people watch these videos, the more that they go and visit themselves these locations, it reinforces the story. Like, it's not my story. it's just I've been to these locations so many times. We've never had anyone come with us who's been able to say, yes, I think the Inca did that, or yes, I think that the Egyptians did that. Like nobody's come away from experiencing these places and have been able to say that. They all go, oh my God, you know. And of course, it's much more incredible to go to these places than it is to see pictures or videos. But you know, most people either can't afford or physically can't go to these locations. So yeah, it's becoming more and more obvious, and just through time and through people watching this stuff, more and more people are becoming convinced that there's a lot more to our history than what we've been taught, and that these paradigms are crumbling as the academics are not able
what up,
to back
what
up
up, Stash?
their statements. Like they can't show
Chips,
how
wow,
a
insane.
bronze tool could do the work,
Oh man,
you know, on a
what's
hard
up, dude?
stone like granite. And so
Pretty good, man. That's all right. Thanks, homie.
their paradigm is disappearing, and the new
Pretty good today, actually.
younger
We've been going
academics that
fast.
are coming up, they see this stuff. They see it themselves. They see that the
Hope you're doing well,
nature
dude.
of the history is much more complex than what their professors taught them. And now they talk in secret about it, but gradually they'll start opening up and tell the world that, you know, our history is much more complex and much grander than what we think or what we used to think.
What?
Yeah, and I certainly welcome that new paradigm coming in. That's why, you know, individuals like you and many others, and as myself, we work so hard to expose and just show the world that look at this. This completely changes our entire story. This completely changes our understanding of ancient history and the rise and fall, it seems, of sophisticated civilizations becoming less sophisticated every single time until before long, instead of thinking that things are in a linear way like we've been told, where we've advanced from A to B now and we're the most advanced ever, it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like it's been more of this slow rise and fall until before long, like after these cataclysms of the Younger Dryas 12 to 13,000 years ago, it seems like civilization here lost a tremendous amount of knowledge, and we've, instead of going up, we've almost gone backwards in our knowledge and understanding of balance. So do you see you know, a lot of merit in studying these structures in a way where we can almost learn about our previous selves to maybe relook at where we are now and change our perspectives a little bit about what our place is in the cosmos and what we are here, what we're doing here?
Yeah, well, I think it's quite a humbling thing, because when you can see that there were people or beings capable of doing things that we can't, it grounds you back to Earth, that we are not the most sophisticated life forms that have ever existed here. You know, maybe it was our ancestors, maybe it was someone else, but yeah, for me, it's a very humbling feeling to stand next to these things and just try to figure out how it was done, and look at the almost impossibility of their construction. That's what's awe-inspiring to visit these places.
I want to get your thoughts on one more area as we sort of conclude our analysis of these megalithic lost civilizations. When you look in places like in the back of me, Ollantaytambo, especially in places like Peru, we don't really see that in a lot of other places. We find these knobs that were deliberately carved on these stones themselves, which seem to have some kind of a potential energetic or harmonic purpose. And at the same time, when you map something like ley lines, these energetic convergence zones around the world, we find that now they're not quite on the spots where these sites are, but they're close. And doesn't that sort of give you some information when you look at the fact that if we had a pole shift and things moved around to where energetic ley lines may be in a different location now, does that give us any information to help us understand why they were built in the first place?
Well, that's the curious thing. I'm sure you're aware of the videos that show that the present equator in the distant past, there was a different equator that was at an angle of, I think, 19 degrees. And that if you plot the ancient sites, they're all either on or very close to that ancient equator. So start at Easter Island, like you go from Easter Island to the town of Paracas, which is where I'm at in Peru. That's where the elongated skull people live. Then from there you go to Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo, and then you go to the Great Pyramid, and then you go to Mohenjo-Daro, in Pakistan. And so they all seem to have been built on this ancient equator. Also in Peru and Bolivia, there's another line that comes at an angle like that. It's called the Path of Viracocha, and all of the megalithic sites are located on that line, like Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, Temple of the Sun in Lake Titicaca, Pumapunku and Tiwanaku, and on and on and on it goes. It goes down into Chile, but that was a relatively recent discovery. We also had some people who were very talented at dowsing with rods. On this one tour we had 6 of them, and one of them was incredibly sensitive at being able to figure out the band or the width of what these lines were, energetic lines, something like, at Machu Picchu, something like 300 feet across. He had some kind of nervous condition which actually made him able to be very sensitive to, most people think dowsing rods are BS or whatever, but he was incredible at being able to manipulate or to sense these things, even like male and female sub-energy bands going back and forth. So that was quite intriguing.
So if these sites are located, like if we think of Giza, right, it's supposed to be the geographic center of the planet, and these sites are on this ancient equator system, and they have an energetic harmonic purpose. Okay, let's say that that's what they are. Would you say that these would potentially have been built, because we don't have any writings on them, right? There's no hieroglyphs on them. That they're obviously not the purpose that the ancient pharaohs of Egypt had for what we think of as them. So, do you think that they were potentially built as some kind of a balancer of energy if these ancient people had known that these cataclysms happen and that there's pole shifting that leads to these incredible disasters, right? Would that potentially imply that they knew that those could happen and that maybe they were building these to prevent the severity of those events? What is your take on that?
Yeah, something like that. Some of the sites, we don't know how old they are. They're probably 13,000 plus, but we can't say how old they are. But they're pre-cataclysmic. The curious thing is, again, that a number of them the orientation is about 23 degrees off north, south, east, and west. So that suggests that the axis of the Earth shifted. And but the Great Pyramids on the Giza Plateau, they're oriented within something like 3 degrees or 3 degrees of arc or something like that from perfect orientation north, south, east, and west. So I think the Giza Plateau pyramids were built either during the cataclysm or right after the cataclysm by who knows. And that complex was built as a stabilizing energetic complex for the planet, and that's why it was located at the geographic center of the planet. That's very curious. The other ones seem to have been energetic in some kind of way, but what the actual function was, whether it was harnessing or focusing or amplifying Earth energy or what, that's kind of the theory that we're looking at now. But for what use? To expand consciousness maybe, or to create localized force fields of some kind or energetic fields. Again, it's something that it's so enigmatic. And the knobs themselves, like the standard story is that the knobs were put there on purpose so that the ancient Inca, for example, could lift the stones up and put them into place. And then when you say some of the biggest ones don't have knobs, then the archaeologists say, well, the Inca cut those ones off. Like, no, because some of the biggest ones don't have any knobs. Again, there's no logic to their story. It seems to be some kind of energetic function, but what specifically, I don't know. Some people think it almost looks like an extrusion machine. How they make plastic products now. Who knows? That's one of the biggest enigmas are these nods. 'Cause
Oh,
you
thank you,
find
Mom.
them
Thank you. Appreciate that.
in
That's nice of
many
you.
different
Thank you, Mom.
locations around the world. You find them in India, you find them in Turkey, you find them in Egypt, all over the place.
Well, clearly it points to the fact that they had a very specific reason why they did all the things they did. It wasn't random. Like when we think of as, oh, this civilization built here because of their access to water. But look at places like Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, built at 11 elevation up there near you at 11,000 feet in a place that has very sparse water and food. It's very hostile conditions to live up there. So clearly, the purpose of them building had nothing to do with their
What the
access
fuck?
to being able to just grow crops and just create a civilization. It was more of a specific location on the planet that they needed to build them at, rather than having all of these necessary things available around them, which really begs the question of, if they knew that that was as important to do as they did. I mean, some of the feats involved in this requiring traveling 400 to perhaps 1,000 miles away to get these blocks that we have no idea how they even lifted. And then you like you mentioned, all Lake Tombo, these stones like are in back of me that were taken off the top of a mountain, stones that are over 50 tons each. This was all very deliberate. This was all done as in like there was a grand plan needed.
What's up,
here.
Christian?
So
How you
the
doing,
question
man?
is,
Welcome.
if that was 13,000 years ago, roughly, that these cataclysms happened that led to the destruction of these civilizations and a lot of the destruction we find on the structures themselves, it means that we know
Good, man.
they were
I'm good,
built
thanks,
before.
dude.
But really, the ultimate question I want to ask you as we conclude here is, here we are 12 to 13,000 years later, and we're finding a lot of increased volcanism and geologic activity going on around the world, and we're seeing the North Pole shifting, and they're flying up there in aircraft and trying to reevaluate where the true north is. Are we in another one of these cycles now? And this isn't a fear-based question, it's just a realistic question. What do you see for our future of these changes? Are we going to learn the necessary lessons needed to be able to reach the next step? Or are we going to disappear just like these past civilizations have?
I think we're going to disappear because it'll come with no warning, and it'll be moving possibly at the speed of light. So I very much, we're within the time window, but it could be tomorrow, it could be 1,000 years from now. I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetimes, but again, according to Paul Laviolette, it's a cycle of and the same with Robert Schoch. It's a cycle of every 13,000 years, plus or minus. A destructive series of events happen. So I think, one is coming, but I wouldn't be fearful of it. And I hope it's not going to happen in our lifetime.
Oh my fucking god.
Is there any
I
chance
hate this
that,
guy.
with some of the whispers and secrets of some of the technology that we may or may not have, potentially some of the strange visitations to the North and South Pole and some of the interest in Antarctica, do you think that there is potentially an attempt to try to prevent this? Is this a known thing? And is it possible that, in your opinion, that technology that we have present could potentially prevent, maybe not all of the solar outburst destruction that could happen on the planet, but what about preventing a full pole shift?
No, I don't. I think we're at the whim of the forces of the universe, and people in the know, and people with tremendous wealth are either building underground or they're moving to
so fucking much.
Very rural locations in order to be able to cover their own asses, I guess. But for the general population, it's like, nope, it'll happen, and that'll be just another stage in the story of life on Earth.
Incredible.
I'm simply glad that we do have these ancient megalithic structures to be able to study, because they tell us that what the capability was and potentially could be in the future.
All right, Brian, last question for you, and it's a quick one. Do you think within your lifetime that the paradigm of lost civilizations in our ancient history and accepting megalithic structures as being from an earlier culture. Do you think that this paradigm is going to change within your or my lifetime? Or do you think that it's going to remain sort of in the background?
Well, I think more and more people are waking up to it, not the general population, because most people, when they visit ancient locations, they simply want to be told a story. So if the guide says Machu Picchu was built by the Inca, then everyone just goes, oh, okay. They're not shown the difference between the megalithic aspect and the Inca aspect. But every time I go to Machu Picchu now, some of the local guides do come up to me and say, I've been watching your videos and I had no idea that there was a difference in construction technique. But now I know, and that's what I tell the people when they come to visit. So that's more of what I want to do than anything else. And originally it was to try to wake up the population in general, but now I would like it, or I like the fact that I'm being able to influence local, guides of the complexity of the nature of the things that they show people. That's, I'm very happy about that. That, to me, that means my job isn't necessarily done, but it means that I don't carry the burden of having to be the only one doing this kind of stuff. And of course, there are other great channels like Bright Insight and Uncharted X and many others. The Lost History Channel, like there are many YouTube channels now that are talking about the same thing. So that's wonderful. The more of those there are, then the better for all of us.
Yeah, and that's one of the main focuses of my channel as well. And the more channels and more individuals we can get that show this and point it out to the public, like you said, the more we can slowly influence a change of mind that eventually will become overwhelming to have us relook at this in a really serious way and potentially rewrite our entire history book. Brian, I just want to say I want to thank you for all of the dedication and hard work you're doing around the world on all these sites. You've changed my perspective. It really helped clarity in my own perspective of looking at ancient history and lost civilizations.
Oh, come on.
And I want to say just thank you to all those people that feel the same way as I do, and also for coming on the show today and having this great discussion. Can you go ahead and tell everybody where they can find your work, and maybe even just end out and just letting people know some of these future visits and projects that you're working on?
Sure. Well, everything is basically at my website, which is hiddenincatours.com. And links to all the, like I've got 1,470 videos now or something like that. And like 97% of the website has free information, because that's my main job is to share what I learned with the world. There is a commercial angle to it as well, like the books and the tours. The tours are presently on hold because of what we're all going through. Have no idea when, for example, the Lima International Airport is going to open again. They keep delaying it. But I'm still planning on doing tours in Egypt and Peru and Bolivia, once in a while Easter Island, once every 5 years go to Turkey maybe, and Baalbek and Petra, places like that. And I'd like to go to India once, but again, who knows when that's going to happen. So that's where people can find basically everything that I've done, and everything I will be doing will be.
Scam.
I keep adding new posts to my website as time goes on. That's where it all is.
Certainly a lot to look forward to. I'm always excited for new videos that you put up. Always something new to learn. So I just want to say I truly appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you for coming on today. This has been episode number 8 of Mastermind Discussions with Brian Forrester. Until next time.
So this is the Aswan Quarry, located in the southernmost part of Egypt. Solid granite, and this quarry has been used for several thousand years. The question is, how many thousands of years? These are the standard techniques used by the dynastic Egyptians for pouring stone. And this as well. You see very crude work, but what we're going to see is phenomenal. Harder. Now, honestly, that is how some Egyptologists think that the quarrying was done in the Aswan area. What we do find are these mysterious scoop marks, and what technology this was is still unknown. But it's clearly an example of lost ancient technology as compared, again, to the simple method used by the dynastic Egyptians of putting wedges in. So here we see side by side. On the right, you see the Egyptian technique. On the left, lost ancient high technology technique. So it's been described as scooping, but was it some kind of abrasive machine at work? Or something even more bizarre than that? Possibly a mechanism that emitted an energy field of some kind, destabilizing the quartz in the granite and causing the granite to turn into sand. Now here we're looking into the actual trough area of the 1,200 ton obelisk that was never completed. 1,200 tons. And here we get another visual look of the obelisk in its entirety, never completed. It's as if work suddenly stopped on this massive project. And again, these intriguing, even so-called scoop marks that we see in many different areas of the quarry, but especially where the unfinished giant obelisk is. Here you see the trough on the right side, and then here you see the trough on the left side. Again, with these very interesting even indentation. And this is called a test pit that goes down several feet. A human being could barely fit inside there, let alone try to work the surfaces. And again, these very intriguing, even marks, and the complexity of the Aswan quarry itself. So let's see how the people with hand tools are now making progress. Completely ridiculous to think that that was the technique. This again, you see where wedges were put in by the dynastic Egyptians and even Romans to break stone. And then a smaller obelisk that also was never completed. These intriguing scoop marks. You can see they were working on both sides, the left and right, and they were almost able to release the stone from the quarry. But something happened in Aswan that stopped the work. And the question is, what was it? Let's again see how the people using hand tools are making out.
There's nothing else you can do.
There can be no question
scam.
that there was a very advanced technological civilization in ancient Egypt before the pharaohs. The reason this obelisk was not finished could have been the presence of this crack that appeared. And so, we're hopeful that in April of 2019 you'll be able to join us and see these amazing sights for yourself, because being there is completely different than simply watching a video. which is kind of obvious, but that is the case. So these are related books of mine at Amazon.com and also on my website. Lost Ancient Technology of Egypt, which of course includes a section about Aswan. Aftershock, the ancient cataclysms that erased human history. This could explain
what's
why
up,
the
partner?
word
How you
stopped
doing,
at
man?
Aswan and other places.
How you doing, my dude?
Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh, actually my very favorite of all of the pharaohs. And
What's up,
Lost
broski? How you
Ancient
doing, man?
Technology of Egypt, Volume 2, which again has an extensive section about. Greetings, this is Brian Forrester of Hidden Inca Tours, and this is the interior